The information on all these charts tell us what these charts are to be used for. For example, this particular chart is for planning and conducting flights in VMC in accordance with VFR. So this is a VFR chart. It kind of says so on the cover. It also tells us this chart is designed for VMC flight, France flight level 115, Germany flight level 100, Switzerland flight level 150. So it actually tells us what altitudes this chart is designed for. All charts have something similar. This particular one tells us that this is for flights at and above flight level 200. This chart tells us that it's for flights within the continental US, and the airways shown on these charts are effective too, but not including flight level 180 or 18,000 feet above mean sea level. It tells us that if we want airways higher than that, then we should look at another chart, which in this particular case is going to direct us to the US high charts. For example, this one. Okay, so this is a high altitude chart. The one that we saw earlier was a low altitude chart. It's important to know which chart to use so that you don't start planning on the wrong chart and you find that it doesn't have the information that you require. These charts also tell us about the different airspace that are covered in the chart. Things like restricted areas, cruising levels, and also what the limits of the airspace are. For example, this particular chart gives us the limits and classification of upper airspace for each of the areas in the chart. Where in the chart, class of airspace, as well as the particular levels within that airspace. Cruising levels, direction for the various FIRs. On the VFR chart, we don't find that information on the cover page, but we do find it on the inside of the map. So there we have the airspace classification for Germany. In the VFR chart we also have more detail. For example, Class A airspace in Germany, VFR flights are prohibited. So what are all the requirements for Class B, Class C, Class E, F and G airspace? There's also a convenient table that will help us with reading the identifications or the idents for the various facilities. So here's a convenient Morse code table. The Morse code table can be used to help positively identify navigation aids. For example, let's say we're tuning into and trying to identify Rottenburg NDB station. This is an NDB station on 303, and the identification code that will be broadcast by the station is Romeo Tango Tango, which can be played orally on an aircraft's beat frequency oscillator, or BFO. Once we tune into the station, we might hear something that sounds a little bit like this. Which is basically Romeo Tango Tango broadcast in a Morse code. And once we hear that, we know we're tuned into this particular station. As well as a convenient feet to meter conversion table. We also have a reminder that in France, bearings and tracks are magnetic and distances are nautical miles. Other indications of the class of airspace that we're in are the different types of borders we have. For example, this one has got 3 borders where the Class C airspace changes. For example, I know it's Class C airspace because the color here matches the color for B, C, and D airspace, or Bravo, Charlie, and Delta airspace. It actually tells me Class C airspace. And that tells me Class C from 3,500 all the way through flight level 100, and this one's from 4,500 to flight level 100, and flight level 650 to flight level 100. So somewhere between 4,500 and 6,500, there's a transition where we fly from QNH to QNE, or standard. Yeah, so transitions somewhere between here. This Class C airspace actually terminates at flight level 100, or the equivalent of 10,000 feet. But the lower limits are different. I know this is Class E airspace because, first of all, it's bordered in blue. And in blue we have Class E, F, and G airspace. And it also tells me what the lower limits of the airspace are. So Class E airspace ends at 10,000 feet, but the lower limit of Class E airspace, for example in this case, Class E airspace commences at 1,000 feet AGL. So we know Class E airspace in this particular area is for 1,000 feet above ground level all the way up to 10,000 feet. And that is how we use the airspace classification. Let's look for an airport in this chart. Perhaps let's look for Cairo, for example. And Cairo is in Egypt. It's Class A airspace from flight level 195, and there's no upper limit. Where do I find Cairo? On chart number 1. And there's Cairo International. Cairo International has an IFR approach because the name is in capital letters. Within the Cairo airspace, there are also areas that have a shaded magenta circle, and these are depending on what they're circled with. For example, we have circles and we have rectangles of various shapes. This area, HED, well, this stands for Cairo. There's a danger area, 22. This particular one for Cairo is prohibited area number 2, and I've got danger area 3, danger area 10. What do all these mean? Well, if we go to the information panel, I can find out what all these actually mean, because there's not enough space for me to put it all in writing in this particular area. It will become overly congested. Some places have an area map. This one doesn't, because it doesn't have that shaded gray border. But if we go to the information section of this chart, if we go down the list, you can see we have some information with regards to airspace restricted areas. all the various cities that we have, and Egypt happens to be the first one, HE. If we want to know a little bit more about it, we can go through this legend. For example, if we had looked at HE Danger Area 10, which we saw just now, it's from ground to flight level 400, so all the way from the surface to 40,000 feet. What it is exactly, this legend doesn't tell us, but it tells us that this particular one, if I want to find the details, what it's about and whether it's active like right now, today, when we're going to do our flight, we'll have to refer to the NOTAM because some of these may not be in permanent nature. Others, for example, we looked at Prohibited Area 16 and it doesn't say NOTAM, so that happens to be a permanent one. And if I want to find details about all these different areas, I would have to look in the AIP for specifically what they're about. It could be recreational area, it could be there's some dangerous activities, or it could be military, restricted area, and prohibited areas.